So we spent last month talking about getting healthy. We looked at different areas of our life. We're kind of continuing that theme, but this month we're turning our attention to more stuff that's outside, more external stuff, looking at our relationships. Eventually, towards the end of the month, we're going to be talking about marriages and family. But today we're going to start with something that I think affects every one of us. And it's the gift of friendship. We're talking about having friends. And one of the things that I have seen is a growing awareness of the fact that we have become very isolated in our society. We have social media and we connect that way, but it's still not quite the same. I'm still not sold that it's the same thing. And I think that I see a growing trend of isolated people as we live. If you think about it, most of us drive our own cars to work, right? Most of us around here, we really don't carpool. It's just not that convenient. We're going different places. So we drive by ourselves to work, and then we drive by ourselves home. And then when we get there, we do something amazing. We go into our own homes and we shut the door. And that's typically where we spend the rest of the evening, right? I want you to think about this. When is the last time you went to visit somebody? Outside of maybe really close family, when is the last time that you just got in your car, or maybe you were close enough to walk, where you went over to somebody's house unannounced? For most of us, that doesn't happen, does it? We just don't show up at somebody's house unannounced. Most of the time, we call and plan ahead to make sure that we are not bothering them. I can't tell you the number of times that I've thought about just stopping into somebody's house, and the first thought has been, well, they might be busy. Maybe they weren't expecting me, and I really don't want to bother them. And so we've become very accustomed to this idea of we leave people alone because they're probably so busy that they don't have time for us. In fact, during the summer, I've noticed a trend on my street. Those of my neighbors who have air conditioning when it's hot tend to be inside with the doors and windows closed. Now, most of my neighbors do have air conditioning. A couple that neighbors that don't, they might be outside, but you don't see them really like sitting there relaxing on their front porch. You're not just going to walk over and do something. In fact, I've noticed that over the years, I look for them to be outside doing something so that I can go talk to them. But rarely do we knock on the door and just say, hey, I want you to pop by and see how you're doing. I'm convinced that our society has just become more and more isolated. Why is that a problem? Is it a problem? I'm convinced it's a problem. Because we are wired for connectedness. We are wired for community. We need other people around us. And if you read the scriptures, not only do we find amazing stories about God working with people, but we find people working with people. We find friends, we find groups of people who spend their lives living together, serving together, growing together, and developing a community where they live life with one another. I don't know that we ever appreciate friendship as much as when we find ourselves without friends. And as I was thinking about that, this growing desire to talk about the need for friendship and to maybe even address how do we be a good friend? I tell my daughter that all the time. Well, Allie, you need to be a good friend. That means you need to be a kind friend. And it means probably not pulling hair or taking somebody's toys when they're playing with it. And you say, well, that's what kids do, but I've seen adults do that. We maybe don't pull hair, but we find other ways to hurt, right? We maybe don't take toys, but we might take somebody up or take something else. And, as adults, sometimes we need to be reminded, be a good friend. Be the kind of friend that you would love to have. And so I was thinking of all of the biblical stories that deal with friendship. And there are a lot. And it would be very easy to talk about Jesus and the disciples. It would be very easy to talk about Jesus and the 3 disciples who were particularly close to him. I thought about looking at some other New Testament stories of Jesus, Mary, and Lazarus as they were friends. And the effect that had. I thought about Paul and Timothy. I even thought about Old Testament. And we have Ruth and Naomi. We have Abraham and Lot. And we have the friends that I settled on for today, David and Jonathan. And this is just a quick sampling. There are lots of friends mentioned throughout the scripture. And this idea of friendship and being in community is not some new age thing. This is old. We need people. We need people around us. We need community. We need friendship. And so this morning we're going to look at an Old Testament passage, if you have your Bibles. 1 Samuel chapter 20. That's going to be closer to the beginning. If you're in Psalms, turn back towards the front of your Bible. 1 Samuel chapter 20. We're looking at this saying, boy, we don't know our Old Testament the way we know our New Testament. That's pretty true. If you're in 1 Kings, if you're in Kings, you're still a little too far back. Turn a little bit forward. 1 Samuel chapter 20. And we're going to start with verse 1. And this is a very complex story. We're kind of jumping right into the middle, but I think it shows the story of two friends going through a really, really difficult situation. Then David fled from Naioth at Ramah and went to Jonathan and asked, "What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father?" Now right here, Jonathan's father is King Saul. Saul is the king. David has been anointed as the new king of Israel. And so there is growing tension between the old king and the king that is coming up. And Saul is very, very angry with David and trying to kill him. So he's asking, what is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he is trying to take my life? And Jonathan said what every good son would say. No way. My dad would never do that. Right? What a natural statement. Never. You are not going to die. Look, my father doesn't do anything great or small without confiding in me. Why would he hide this from me? It's not so. But David took an oath and said, "Your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes." And he has said to himself, "Jonathan must not know this, or he will be grieved. Yet as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, there is only a step between me and death." Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you." So David said, "Look, tomorrow is the new moon festival, and I am supposed to dine with the king. But let me go and hide into the field and into the evening of the day after tomorrow. If your father misses me at all, tell him, David earnestly asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown, because an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan. If he says, 'Very well,' then your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, you can be sure that he is determined to harm me. As for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Lord. If I am guilty, then kill me yourself." You ever say that to your friends, by the way? "Hey, if I'm guilty, you can kill me." No. If I'm guilty, you can be mad at me. But we're not going any further than that. "But why hand me over to your father?" "Never," Jonathan said. "If I had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, wouldn't I tell you?" David asked, "Who will tell me if your father answers you harshly?" "Come," Jonathan said, "let's go out into the field." So they went there together. They begin to hatch a plan of how they're going to do this. Then Jonathan said to David, "By the Lord, the God of Israel, I will surely sound out my father by the day after tomorrow. If he is favorably disposed toward you," meaning if he's really mad at you, "will I not send you word and let you know? But if my father is inclined to harm you, may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I do not let you know and send you away safely. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father, but show me unfailing kindness that like the Lord has as long as I live, so that I may not be killed, and that I do whatever cut off the kindness from my family. Not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth." This is a long story, isn't it? So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May the Lord call David's enemies to account." And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, because he loved him as he loved himself. Then Jonathan said to David, "Tomorrow is the new moon festival. You will be missed because your seat will be empty. The day after tomorrow, toward evening, go to the place where you hid when this trouble began, and wait by the stone Ezel. I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it as though I were shooting at a target. Then I will send a boy and say, go find the arrows. And if I say to him, look, the arrows are on the side of you, bring them here, then come, because as surely as the Lord lives, you are safe. There is no danger. But if I say to the boy, look, the arrows are beyond you, then you must go, because the Lord has sent you away. And about the matter you and I discussed, remember the Lord is witness between you and me forever. So David hid in the field, and when the new moon festival came, the king sat down to eat. He sat in his customary place by the wall opposite Jonathan, and Abner sat next to Saul, but David's place was empty. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonially unclean. Surely he is unclean. But the next day, the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. Then Saul said to his son Jonathan, why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the meal, either yesterday or today? I don't know about you, but when my kids are in trouble, where is your son, is what I typically ask Jen, right? Where is your daughter? And I say that because I heard my parents do that many times when I was in trouble. It starts to give us an inkling of how upset, how angry Saul is with David. Because he doesn't even say his name. He refers to him as that son of Jesse. Why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the meal either yesterday or today? Jonathan answered, David earnestly asked me for permission to go to Bethlehem. That was a lie, right? Just pointing that out. He said, let me go because our family is observing a sacrifice in the town and my brother has ordered me to be there. If I have found favor in your eyes, let me go away to see my brothers. That's why he has not come to the king's table. Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to him, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman. I blame your mother. I share all this because this stuff is not new when we say it. Don't you know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send and bring him to me, for he must die. Why should he be put to death? What has he done? Jonathan asked his father. But Saul hurled his spear at him to kill him. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. Just a slight hint there, guys. He threw the spear. Jonathan got up from the table with fierce anger, and on that second day of the month he did not eat, because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for his meeting with David. He had a small boy with him, and he said to the boy, run and find the arrows I shoot. As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy came to the place where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, Jonathan called out after him, isn't the arrow beyond you? Then he shouted, hurry, go quickly, don't stop. The boy picked up the arrow and returned to his master. The boy knew nothing of all this, only Jonathan and David knew. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said, go carry them back to town. After the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times, with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together. But David wept the most. Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord is witness between you and me, between your descendants and my descendants forever. Then David left, and Jonathan went back to the town. I know that is a much longer passage than I typically read, but you have to hear what is going on between these two friends. Jonathan, his father, is currently king, and the Lord had removed favor from Saul. Saul's heart had become hardened. He was changing. He was not the man that he had been. And David, although David had been doing some wonderful things, he had found all of this favor with everyone, and he was growing in popularity. Jealousy began to arise from Saul to David, and it put David's life in jeopardy. And I really feel for Jonathan here because he couldn't bear to see this happen. One of his closest friends and his father. Imagine the position in that. And so here we have these two friends, and they're getting together, and David says, Jonathan, we've got to talk. there's a problem. Can you imagine going to one of your closest friends and saying, I think your dad is trying to have me killed? Can you imagine saying that? I mean, I've had trouble saying, boy, you know, we've kind of had some problems with your kids. We've been struggling this way a little bit. And it's nothing near that circumstance. Whenever we go to a friend and we begin to share news, isn't there some real risk there? Think about that. David is about to share something life-changing with Jonathan. And there is this huge risk of the unknown, of how Jonathan is going to respond. Is he going to disown David? Is he going to side with his father? Is he going to perhaps kill him right there? Maybe he's in on it. David does not know exactly what Jonathan is going to do. And so there is all of this risk. I want you to think of that because part of friendship, part of this gift of friendship is a risk that we take. Because if we're really going to become friends, don't we open ourselves up to become vulnerable? Typically, right? We put ourselves out there and we say, in essence, back to the middle school days, do you want to be friends? Check yes or no. And I don't know about you, but I always made the no box really tiny. Big box for yes, little box for no. Because when somebody says no, it hurts. In a similar way, when we have close friends and we go to talk to them about something that is intense, something that is potentially volatile, there is a huge risk that they will just blow us off. That they will minimize the situation, that they're not going to take us seriously, or that they'll respond in some way that is harmful or full of rejection. See, part of being a good friend is taking the risk that comes along with being a friend. Over the years, I've taken that risk many times. Sometimes it's been good. Sometimes it hasn't. I bet I'm not the only one, right? I'm not the only one that has taken a risk to have a friend and then things did not turn out the way I thought it would be. There is this temptation when that happens repeatedly to shut down more and more. The challenge then is how do we engage in risk of making new friends or keeping new friends or deepening our friendship and not becoming jaded by the possibility of the risk? How do we do that? I wish I knew. I think we keep going. I think we keep going. Because we've had many times where we took the risk and it worked out well. And sometimes we never know what's going to happen until we actually step out there and do it. And so I look at Jonathan and David and I see the risk. And each time we come to a crisis, each time we come to a crossroads, there is the possibility things may not go well. But hopefully it does. Which brings us to another part, a potential part of friendship, especially for Jonathan and David. Their story in this crossroads, it's filled with pain. This crossroad actually has pain in it. We're saying we're supposed to be talking about friendship that should be happy. But as real friends, don't we share pain with one another? We should. In fact, I'm convinced that a real sign of friendship are the friends who will stand with you or sit with you when you're hurting.
Amen.
That they're not just there for the good times, but they actually will come and see you in the bad times. Or in the times where maybe you've had big disagreements. Or maybe you haven't been able to see eye to eye, but they will share the pain with you. It is amazing to me that Jonathan and David just don't part ways. I mean, they do part ways, but they don't part friendship. And even in that, they make a covenant to one another that when David becomes king, he will not eradicate Jonathan's family. Now, that was common practice. When the new king became king, you got rid of the old king's family, so that you didn't have anybody else trying to take your throne away. And so Jonathan and David actually deal with pain and remain friends. Past couple weeks, I've been to more funerals than I care to address. It wasn't because it was a personal relative or friend who had passed, but it was because it was family and friend members who had passed. And one of the things that we can do for our friends, one of the things that we can do to help show our friendship is to be there and to support. I am convinced it matters as friends if we stand with people when they're hurting. So when we look at this gift of friendship, so far we've got risk and we've got pain. Who wants a friend? You're all thinking, not me. And I really don't want to be your friend. No, it's part of it. It's absolutely part of it. Another part, and I think we're going to flip to the other side of this coin, is hope. Because what encourages us to take that risk, what encourages us to face the pain, is the hope that we'll be friends. As I look at David and Jonathan, David hoped with all of his heart that he could go to his friend, who was his best friend, and say, this is what is going on. I need you to help me in this moment. And he hoped that he would respond in a way that was helpful. Over the years, I have hoped that many friends would respond when I had a problem. And you know what? A surprising number of them really did. And it was good, and it was something that we were able to do together. It is that hope that I think actually encourages us to take the risk. Another part is trust, and how this goes together. And the funny thing about trust, and as we have Cinda, Shannon, and Bev here, people ask, how do you trust? I always tell them, you actually have to put it out there. You actually have to try to trust, to build trust. Is that what you guys would say? You have to try to trust, to build trust. But the amazing thing, as we build trust with one another, and it becomes verified and it becomes stronger, doesn't that bond become that much tougher to break for the hard times? And I think it's the trust that David had with Jonathan. If you look at this, David actually trusted Jonathan with all of his life. David trusted Jonathan with his entire life. In fact, in that moment, when David took the risk to share the pain of what he had experienced, Jonathan could have turned him in. And in that moment, he could have said, you know what? If you weren't here, I'd be king. Because that's where Jonathan was. Jonathan was the oldest son of Saul. He should have been king. But because of Samuel's blessing, it went from Saul to David. So Saul's line was cut, David's line began. And so the tremendous amount of trust that David had in the integrity and the character of Jonathan enabled him to take this situation right there. Otherwise, it would have been very easy for Jonathan to be selfish and to say, well, if I get rid of you, this is really going to benefit me. Now, just a thought, I bet we've had those friends too, that threw us under the bus. Kind of like Aiden did with his parents. I wanted to color it, but they wouldn't let me. It's easy to throw someone under the bus when you think it's going to benefit you, right? So part of the gift of friendship is trust. Actually trust with our life. And I think the last part of this is something that we talk about often at Cornerstone. We term it wide. That's the way we refer to it, as wide. But it is loving others as yourself, or selfless love. When I look for the qualities in a friend that I hope will last, that we will be friends for many years, there's all of these things. I don't look for risk. I don't look for pain. I assume that that will be part of the equation at some point as we go through life together. But I hope, I look for trust, and I look for someone who loves other people the way they love themselves. Because if I can find that, if I can find someone who really loves people, And for me, I do start to look to see what their faith is like. I think that has an influence in it tremendously, especially within the church. That should be the ideal. Although I have been in the church long enough to know that just because you claim to be a Christian does not mean you love others the way you love yourself. So it's just not limited to those in the church. But I look for those who love others the way they love themselves. And I've got to tell you, if that's the way you're living, if that's the way you love and you reach out to people, you're probably someone worth trusting. And you're probably worth the hope to invest. And you'll probably be part of the pain that we may go through together, and it means you're worth the risk. I share all that to say that over the years, selfish people have not been worth the risk for me. That sounds really hard, doesn't it? But people who don't love others the way they love themselves typically can't be trusted. And it means the hope that I put in them maybe wasn't the best, and it means that the pain that we went through maybe could have been different, and the risk did not work out well. This idea of loving others the way we love ourselves, it actually is at the center of everything that we do. I talk about all this because last month didn't we talk about loving ourselves well? Right? We talked about being spiritually healthy. We talked about being emotionally healthy, physically healthy. And if you'll notice, we had healthy snacks this morning. You are welcome. Look, I really liked the 15 trays of cookies. So did I. But we're talking about being healthy and loving ourselves well because of the gift that God gave us with all that we are. This month, we're looking at loving others the way we love ourselves. What a great way as we relate emotionally and relationally to people, and doing this in a way that I think benefits every person involved. Ultimately, because of the selfless love that Jonathan demonstrated to David, his line was spared. His family benefited because instead of just taking care of David and making sure they were benefited, he chose to love David anyway and to do the right thing. When we love others well, it comes back to benefit all around. And so this morning, when we look at this gift of friendship, I term it and title it as a gift of friendship because it's rare. But when it happens, it can change lives across the board. And so what do we do with all this? Because at the end, if we just talk about something, it doesn't do much, right? We should apply it. We should do something with it for down the road. Let's start with the premise that we all need friends. Anyone want to argue that? Some of you will say, well, I'm an introvert. I only need one or two friends, but you need at least one friend, right? Some of you are extroverts, and you're like, I want hundreds. That's fine. 1 or 100, it's okay. The point is that we all need friends, right? It's firmly rooted in Scripture. I think we can all attest to that from life experience, that we need someone that we can call on. And so, with that, I think there was truth in the advice that we give our children. If you want to make friends, be a good friend. Doesn't that sound so simple? If you want to make friends, be a good friend. If you want to find people who will love you like you love yourself, then love them the way you love yourself. And that does not sound too far from the model that Christ gave us at all, does it? Because if you go back to the greatest and the second commandment, we are to love God with all that we are and to love our neighbors as ourselves. It is the heart of having friends. It is the heart of living well, and I think doing this thing of life together. It was exciting to me today to be able to share this moment with Sarah and David and Rylan and Lily and grandparents, because it's a moment of friendship together. We're saying this isn't just your responsibility, but we want to partner with you. We do the same thing in our spiritual walk here. We say this isn't just your responsibility to grow and to learn and to study. Let's do it together. We say it's not just your responsibility to go out and find friends. We'd actually like to be friends with one another. But make no mistake, part of friendship is risk, pain, hurt, hope, trust, and selfless love. And so to be good friends, we have to be prepared for all of those parts. I think today, let's just take a moment and reflect. As I did this, I struggled a lot with this week, because you know what I realized? I've been a bad friend at times. At times I have loved myself more than I loved others. I'd love to say that I'm completely over that and it'll never happen again. That's probably not true. Just put it out there. It could be, but it's probably not. I doubt that I'm alone in that revelation. But if we really want to do this gift of friendship well, then we have to be ready. And that means loving others as much as we love ourselves. And so as I was preparing, all of these memories of the times that I was a lousy friend came back. And the one that came back the most, I'll just share this one for you. No one got really hurt. I was probably in first, second grade. My new neighbors moved in. They had built a house. We had gotten to know each other. Their son was just a year younger than me, and so we quickly became friends. Because where I lived, we were on top of a hill. It was my family and my grandparents. That was it. There was nobody to walk to. And, not being able to drive as a child, couldn't really get anywhere. Public transportation wasn't around. So when my neighbors moved in and they had a son my age, we were going to be friends. And we spent a lot of time playing and riding bikes. And one particular thing that we enjoyed doing was standing on a rock that was up about 4 or 5 feet in the air. And we always thought about jumping off of it to see if we could fly. You can see where this is going, can't you? And so one particular day, my friend kept saying, I'm going to jump, I'm going to jump, I'm going to jump. And he wouldn't do it. And so I helped him jump. Not a good friend. Not a good friend in that moment. If we're going to be honest about this, we have to start with ourselves. So I encourage you to bow your heads, to close your eyes, and to pray with me and just maybe perhaps reflect. Say, God, I haven't always been a good friend. I've really messed this up at times. That at times I've been more selfish than at times I've been selfish. God, would you forgive me for being selfish? Would you forgive me for loving myself more than I love others? Because I know it had an impact on my friends, and I know it has an impact on who I am as a follower of Jesus. And God, I just pray today that you would help us to understand and to come to a sense of peace of what it means to love others the way we love ourselves. To have this kind of selfless love where we're willing to give instead of just being focused on what we get. God, I pray for each person here that they would have the friends that they need. That God, that the friendships that you have blessed them with would grow deeper, that they would grow stronger, that although that the times there may be pain, there may be risk, that God, you would build the trust, you would build the hope, you would build this idea of selfless love, so that ultimately, God, we continue to grow together, and to live life together, to worship you together, and to understand what it is to live in a community where God is the center. Father, I thank you for this day, and I thank you for this time together, and God, I just pray for each person here, that you would bless them with the friends that they need, friends who love them as they are, the way you love us. So in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.